Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're going to be talking about The Joyous Cosmology by Alan Watts.
Oh, yeah, one of my favorites.
Um, and I guess just to kind of get started with it, for anyone who hasn't read it yet, it's uh, it's sort of his exploration of the nature of consciousness
hmm
and its connection with the universe.
It's really trippy.
Yeah, it's definitely a little out there, a little mind-bending. And he kind of draws on a lot of different things from Eastern philosophies
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
like personal experiences he had with psychedelic drugs,
Right.
really trying to bridge the gap between I guess in science and religion.
Yeah, he's really looking for that meeting point between science and spirituality, and I think that's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah, and I get like a good place to start with this is this idea that Watts has that
Yeah.
our mind and body are not like these separate things like we tend to think about them.
Yeah, that's a big one, and I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah.
And I think he has this analogy that I think is really helpful. Oh.
Thinking about it as like a self-controlling organism
Mm-hmm.
and where consciousness is more of like a tool
Mm-hmm.
that your body's using for self-regulation rather than
Oh, like it's not like the mind is controlling the body.
right, it's not some separate entity. It's
Right.
all part of the same system.
So that kind of leads to the question then of like, okay, if our consciousness isn't this separate thing controlling us, then where does this idea of self come from?
Well, and that's where I think he gets into the idea that self-consciousness is actually kind of like a state of self-obstruction and frustration.
Okay.
And I think this is something that we can all relate to. Like, we have that voice in our head that's constantly analyzing and judging,
Oh, yeah.
especially today.
Oh, really?
We feel like we're just constantly bombarded with information
And like trying to make sense of it all. Yeah.
exactly. And I think it's that kind of like constant focus on differences and contrasts that kind of leads to this feeling of separation from the world around us.
Okay. And this kind of internal conflict.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're constantly comparing yourself to others
Yeah.
or comparing your experiences to some kind of ideal.
And that's where I think his exploration of like Eastern philosophies like Taoism and Zen Buddhism comes in.
Okay.
Because they really emphasize the interconnectedness of everything, and they offer a way to kind of like experience the world as a unified whole rather than a bunch of separate parts.
So it's almost like you're saying, like, instead of focusing on the differences, like trying to find the similarities.
Yeah, and like seeing how everything's kind of interwoven and related to each other.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I can see how that could be really helpful in feeling less overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's like you're shifting from a narrow focus to a wide angle lens.
Totally.
You're able to kind of like take in the whole picture.
Okay, so you mentioned Taoism and Zen Buddhism. Are there any kind of like specific concepts from those that Watts draws on in the book?
He talks a lot about this analogy from Chinese painting where like the background is just as important as the subject.
Okay.
And I think that's a really beautiful way to illustrate this idea of non-dualistic perspective.
Yeah.
It's not about separating things into like this or that. It's about seeing how everything is kind of connected.
That's a really cool image.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So I know that Watts also kind of delves into some of his personal experiences with psychedelic drugs in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of curious to hear more about that. Like, what was he hoping to discover through those experiences?
Yeah, he talks a lot about using these substances like mescaline and LSD,
Okay.
not as recreational drugs, but like as these sacraments, like as a way to gain insights into the nature of reality.
Oh, so it's almost like he was using them as a scientific tool.
Yeah, exactly. Like a way to explore consciousness.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And it's important to note that he was very cautious
Oh, yeah, for sure.
about like advocating for people to use these substances. He emphasized that they are powerful tools and should be treated with respect
Absolutely.
and used with careful consideration.
Yeah, I think that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely.
So what kind of insights did he gain from these experiences?
Well, he described all these incredible visions,
Okay.
like a world where objects gesture and are perceived as events rather than static things.
What does it even mean?
So like imagine looking at a tree
Mm-hmm.
and not just seeing a solid object, but like a dynamic process of growth and change,
Okay.
constantly interacting with its environment.
So it's like you're seeing the tree as a process rather than a thing.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a completely different way of seeing the world.
Yeah, and that's just one example.
Okay.
Another profound shift he talked about was in his perception of time.
Okay.
He described it as like a dancing present.
A dancing present.
Yeah, like a continuous flow where time wasn't linear, but like an eternal now.
I'm having trouble even picturing that.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But he described it as like a state of heightened awareness
Yeah.
where everything felt interconnected and vibrantly alive.
So it's like being completely in the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
With no past or future, just the now.
Yeah, and he even talked about observing a leaf and feeling like he could perceive the intricate details of its veins and capillaries unfolding in his consciousness.
That's wild. I mean, it sounds like he was almost like merging with the leaf in a way.
Yeah, it's like he was experiencing the interconnectedness of everything. Like the light, the color, the very act of seeing.
So it's not just about seeing, it's about like experiencing it on like a deeper level.
Yeah, exactly. A deeper level of awareness.
Okay, so we've talked about this dancing present idea and kind of this heightened perception that he experienced through psychedelics.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, like, what did he say about the role of the present moment, like outside of those experiences?
Yeah, he believed that our obsession with the past and the future actually prevents us from fully inhabiting the now. Okay.
Like we're so caught up in our thoughts and worries that we miss out on what's actually happening right now.
Yeah, it's like we're always either dwelling on something that's already happened or worrying about something that might happen in the future.
And he saw that mental chatter, that constant analyzing and judging as a major obstacle to experiencing the present moment.
It's like that inner critic that never shuts up.
Exactly. And he talks about how that self-consciousness can kind of like short-circuit the brain.
What do you mean by that?
Like it creates these echoes of fear and guilt that keep us stuck in these negative loops.
So it's like we're not only experiencing something negative,
right,
but then we're also like beating ourselves up about it.
Exactly. Yeah, like suffering about suffering.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And Watts suggests that by letting go of that mental chatter, by surrendering to the present moment, we can experience pain without adding extra layers of suffering.
That sounds really powerful, but I imagine it's easier said than done. It definitely takes practice.
Yeah.
But Watts offers some practical tools and insights to help us cultivate that present moment awareness.
Like what?
He emphasizes things like meditation and contemplation.
Okay.
Finding those quiet spaces to kind of like slow down the mental chatter and connect with a deeper level of awareness.
So it's not just about like having these intellectual insights. It's about actually like finding ways to embody them.
Exactly.
In our daily lives.
It's about integrating them into our experience.
That's really interesting. I like that a lot. And I think it kind of leads into another one of his big ideas.
What's that?
Which is this whole concept of embracing spontaneity and playfulness.
Oh, yeah, the nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. Like it seems kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But I think it makes sense if you think about it as a way to break free from like rigid thinking.
Yeah.
And open ourselves up to new possibilities.
It's about finding that balance between structure and freedom, discipline, and surrender.
That's a great way to put it. And I think it kind of ties back into this idea of the joyous cosmology.
Right.
Like it's about embracing the totality of experience. The light and the shadow, the order and the chaos, and finding a sense of wonder in the very act of being alive. Okay. I'm really intrigued by this idea of the joyous cosmology. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah. I mean, Watts talks about experiencing the world as a unified whole. Embracing the beauty and absurdity of it all.
Okay.
Even the parts that seem messy or chaotic.
So it's not about trying to like make everything perfect or control everything.
No, it's about accepting things as they are.
Okay.
And finding beauty in the unexpected.
So it's like finding beauty in that pile of junk we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm starting to get it now, and I think this is a really good place to kind of wrap up this first part of our deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
We've covered a lot of ground so far.
We have.
From the nature of consciousness to the importance of the present moment to embracing spontaneity and finding beauty in the unexpected.
All part of the joyous cosmology.
Exactly. We'll be back soon to continue our exploration of Alan Watts and his fascinating ideas, so stay tuned. So before the break, we were really getting into some of Watts' more, I guess, abstract ideas about like the nature of reality and experience.
Yeah, definitely some mind-bending stuff.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious to hear more about how his psychedelic experiences, informed or maybe even like challenged these ideas.
Yeah, well, one thing he talked about a lot was this idea of heightened perception.
Okay.
Like, he felt like his senses were just supercharged, revealing all these layers of detail and complexity in the world that we normally miss.
So it's like he was seeing things in a way that most people never get to see.
Exactly. And he described it as like the world was continuously transforming into himself.
Whoa. What does that even mean?
It's hard to explain, but like everything around him was being drawn into his being.
Hmm.
And he even talked about a blurring of sensory boundaries.
Oh.
Like sounds and colors merged, and everything felt connected in a way that defied rational explanation.
That's wild. It almost sounds like synesthesia,
Right.
where people experience like sounds as colors or tastes as shapes.
Exactly. It's like these experiences tap into some underlying unity in our perception.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And this blurring of boundaries also extended to his perception of time.
Yeah.
Remember that dancing present we talked about?
Yeah.
It wasn't just about being in the moment. It was about experiencing time as this continuous flow without a fixed destination,
Okay.
where past, present, and future all seem to converge.
That's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is, yeah, but I
Yeah.
think it speaks to this idea that our normal perception of time is just one way of experiencing it.
Yeah, I guess we tend to think of time as this linear thing,
Right.
but maybe that's just an illusion.
Maybe so.
So you mentioned this idea of like a blurring of boundaries in this dancing present. Do you think those concepts are related?
I think they're definitely connected. Like the boundaries between our senses, the boundaries between past, present, and future. Maybe those are all just constructs of our mind.
Yeah.
And when we let go of those constructs, we can experience reality in a more fluid and interconnected way.
That's really interesting. And it kind of makes me think back to what we were talking about earlier.
What's that?
About Watt's emphasis on the present moment.
Right.
Like maybe by letting go of our attachments to the past or the future,
Yeah.
we can open ourselves up to this more expansive experience of time.
Exactly. And I think that's where his ideas about meditation and contemplation come in. Like by creating those quiet spaces where we can observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment,
Yeah.
we can start to loosen the grip of those mental constructs.
And maybe even experience time in a different way.
It's possible.
That's really cool. I like that a lot.
Me too.
So we've been talking a lot about these kind of like profound and abstract ideas.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, like, how can we actually apply this stuff to our daily lives?
That's a great question. And I think it's something that Watts was really interested in.
Okay.
Like, he didn't just want to talk about these ideas in a theoretical way. He wanted to find ways to integrate them into our everyday experience.
So what kind of advice did he give?
Well, he talked a lot about the importance of cultivating spontaneity and playfulness.
Oh, yeah, the nonsense.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between structure and freedom,
Okay.
discipline and surrender.
I'm not sure I fully understand what that means.
Well, think about it. Like this, we need structure in our lives to function.
Yeah, for sure.
But if we become too rigid, too attached to our routines and our plans, we can miss out on the joy and spontaneity of life.
Okay.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where we have enough structure to feel grounded,
Yeah.
but also enough freedom to allow for unexpected adventures and experiences.
I like that a lot. It kind of reminds me of the idea of embracing the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And Watts even compares the universe to a cosmic game of hide and seek, where we're constantly seeking and discovering, losing, and finding ourselves in the ever-changing dance of existence.
That's a beautiful image. It really captures this sense of wonder and playfulness.
And I think that's a key part of Watts's joyous cosmology. It's not about taking ourselves too seriously. It's about embracing the mystery and the absurdity of it all.
So it's like finding the humor in the chaos.
Exactly. And allowing ourselves to be surprised and delighted by the unexpected twists and turns of life.
That's a great message. I think we could all use a little more of that in our lives.
Absolutely.
This has been a really enlightening conversation, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of Watt's ideas.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more to explore.
So let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and dive even deeper into the joyous cosmology. Okay, so we're back, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
Like, it's all very interesting. But I guess the question I keep coming back to is, like, how do we actually put these ideas into practice?
Right, like how do we take these profound concepts and actually apply them to our everyday lives?
Exactly. It all sounds very nice in theory, but, like, is it really possible to live with that level of acceptance and joy all the time?
Well, I don't think Watts would claim it's about achieving some constant state of bliss. It's more about like shifting our perspective and developing certain habits of mind that allow us to navigate the ups and downs of life.
So it's not about like eliminating suffering altogether.
No, it's about changing our relationship to it.
Okay, I can see that.
And he talks about a lot of different practices that can help with that.
Like what kind of practices?
Well, meditation is a big one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's about creating those quiet spaces where we can observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment and allowing a deeper level of awareness to emerge.
So it's not about like trying to empty our minds?
No, it's more about like noticing what's going on inside without getting carried away by it.
So kind of like being the observer of our own thoughts and feelings?
Exactly. And he also talks about the importance of cultivating spontaneity and playfulness in our lives.
Oh, yeah, the nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. And it might seem counterintuitive, but I think it's about remembering that life isn't meant to be taken too seriously. It's about finding the joy and the humor in the midst of all the chaos.
Like not being afraid to let loose a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. And to embrace the unexpected.
That's a good reminder.
And I think it ties back into this idea of the joyous cosmology, like seeing the world as this interconnected and ever-changing dance.
Yeah, I really like that image.
Me too. And I think it can be a really helpful way to frame our experiences.
Like even when things are tough.
Even when things are tough.
Yeah, like maybe instead of getting caught up in the drama of it all, we can try to step back and see it as part of this larger cosmic dance.
Exactly. And maybe even find a little bit of humor in it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you just got to laugh.
Right.
So I guess the takeaway here is that it's not about trying to force ourselves to be happy all the time.
No, it's more about like cultivating a certain attitude or perspective that allows us to experience the full spectrum of life with all its ups and downs.
Without getting too attached to any one experience.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between acceptance and engagement.
This has been a really incredible deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too.
And I'm definitely going to be thinking about these ideas for a long time to come.
I hope so.
So to everyone listening out there, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing the joyous cosmology.